Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Paratari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Paratari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Paratari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 60, and there are two texts, text 13 and text 14. So we'll chant text 13 together. Aspasta Varmanam Pumsam Aloka Patam Iyusam Ashtita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yositaha Aspasta Vartmanam Pumsam Aloka Patam Iyusam Ashtita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yoshitaha Aspasta Vatmanam Pumsam Aloka Patam Iyusam Ashita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yoshitaha Aspasta Vatmanam Pumsam Aloka Patam Iyusam Astita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yositaha Aspasta Vatmanam Pumsam Aloka Patam Iyusam Astita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yosita Aspasta Vatmanam Pumsam Aloka Patam Iyusam Astita Padavim Subru Praya Siddhanti Yosita. The word for word. Aspasta, uncertain. Vatmanam, whose behavior. Pumsam, of men. Aloka, not acceptable to ordinary society. Patam, way. Iusam, who take to. Astitaha, following. Padavim, the path. Subru, O you whose eyebrows are beautiful. Praya, usually. Siddhanti, suffer. Yosita, woman. And the translation for text 13 is as follows. O fine-browed lady, women are usually destined to suffer when they stay with men whose behavior is uncertain and who pursue a path not approved by society. And text 14. Nishkinchana Vayam Shasvan Nishkinchana Jana Priyaha Tasmat Prayena Nahi Adya Mam Bhajanti Sumajyame. And the translation for text 14. We have no material possessions, and we are dear to those who similarly have nothing. Therefore, O slender one, the wealthy hardly ever worship me. And the purport. Like the Lord, his devotees are uninterested in material sense gratification, being awakened to the superior pleasure of Krishna consciousness. Those who are intoxicated by material wealth cannot appreciate the supreme wealth of the kingdom of God. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Yuta Shri Vaishnavam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Chahe Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Rampapada Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So there's commentary. It was mentioned yesterday in yesterday's class by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So yesterday's text 12. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur analyzes Krishna's mentality. And he does this by looking at Krishna's statements. So yesterday's statement and the next 11 are looked at by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And from this analysis, this is what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. And this is painting a picture of Krishna's mentality, so Krishna's thinking. So, quoting Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that these are Krishna's thoughts. When I gave Rukmini one flower from the heavenly Parijata tree, Satyabhama became so full of anger and pride that I could not pacify her, even by falling at her feet. Only when I gave her a whole Parijata tree was she satisfied. Rukmini, however, did not show any anger, even when she saw me give Satyabhama a whole tree. So how will I be able to taste the sweetness of Rukmini's anger when anger is not possible in her because she's always sober and speaks sweet words? Close quote. So that's Krishna's mentality. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's analysis of all of 12 verses. So based on this reasoning, Krishna then makes a decision, where he concludes his thinking. And this is also per Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So Krishna, this is his conclusion. If I speak like this to Rukmini, I will be able to provoke her anger. So this is his conclusion. He's deliberately making a decision that he's going to provoke Rukmini's anger. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states that other authorities have explained Krishna's speaking as he did from a slightly different perspective, and that perspective is that by speaking to his beloved Rukmini in this way, he was wanting her to respond in such a way so that, because he was trying to uproot the tree of her prema. Those were the words used, different acharyas looking from that angle. So in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's view, it's Krishna wanting to arouse Rukmini's anger. So if we look at this statement today, and I'm particularly going to focus on text 13 because it seems very significant for trying to provoke anger. So Krishna says to Rukmini, pious women who know the path, who follow the path of men like us, whose course of action is unclear. So those were the words for unclear, aspasta vatmanam, who are not strictly religious or irreligious, who sometimes steal other men's wives, who at other times follow the rules of Vedic conduct, and who do not follow even common social behavior, since I insulted your brother even in your presence, must always suffer. If some do not suffer, this is to their credit. So Krishna's presenting a certain picture of himself. And he's pointing out that, implying that if Rukmini is following this person that he is, this picture he's painted of himself, then, she's destined to suffer. And, if she's not suffering, that's to her credit. So, a question can be raised in relation to the obligations that a man has and the rights of a woman. That just immediately is implied from Krishna's statement. So one can ask the question, is Krishna reasoning well or badly? So it's a complex question because one has to explore the whole history of the relationship and Krishna's actions and see if actually the picture that he's painting of himself is accurate or not, or if it is a picture that should be arousing anger in Rukmini because maybe it's inaccurate or maybe the reasoning is very bad. So we can give consideration to Krishna's statement. And this can begin by examining the state of somebody being in prema or love of God. Because understanding is that is the state that Rukmini is in. She's in a state of prema or love of God. So that definition is given, what prema actually is. So we're going to look at the state of somebody who's in prema. It's given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. And this is how he defines prema. When bhava becomes extremely condensed, it is called prema by the learned. It softens the heart completely and produces extreme possessiveness of the Lord in the experiencer. So that gives us insight into the nature of the heart of Rukmini. An extremely soft heart, having extreme possessiveness of Krishna, and this is that condition of prema. So Srila Vishwanath comments further that prema is condensed bliss, the highest state of bliss, compared to the preliminary state of bhava, which has a preliminary appearance of bliss. It's just the beginning of this extremely blissful state. So this extreme possessiveness of the Lord in conjugal love, because it's a relationship between husband and wife, or seeing the Lord as one's husband, and factually that's the case with Rukmini. Um, um, so it's called devotional service in conjugal love because there's service being performed to the Lord in devotion. And although these conjugal feelings are there, they're not at all material. There's some similarity between the spiritual love and material activities. Srila Prabhupada says this, but it's not at all material. So in a regular relationship, one may see one's spouse, for those that are married or have been married, as someone that one is connected to and there's a relationship with. But generally, one doesn't think this person belongs to me. One thinks, this is my spouse, and I wish to serve my spouse, but you don't have a sense of, that this person belongs to me, because if you do, it's on a material level, produces all kinds of negativity. And that negativity may not be pleasant because you may restrict the movements of your spouse. You may even employ a detective to follow the movements of your spouse. It can take rather an unpleasant turn. So, there's an understanding that there's a relationship and it's the free will of the other person to be in that relationship and exclusively having that loving mood of a spouse towards each other that would be so on the material level. Now, it's for this reason, the non-material aspect of spiritual love, that makes devotional reciprocations appear very mysterious, and particularly to persons who are interested only in material activities. It's a little bit difficult to understand, because if you hear about extreme possessiveness, like on a material level, that doesn't sound so good. There are psychological difficulties possibly. But, so spiritual love is very mysterious and difficult to comprehend from a material level. It's coming from a very softened heart. Generally, a person who's highly possessive, it's actually not a soft heart. It's more a heart filled with jealousy or anger or pride, but not so with spiritual love. Now, there's a further definition given of conjugal love, and that is that conjugal love can take two forms. This is in devotional service. One is that there's direct contact, so that was mentioned in yesterday's class too, Sambhoga. And then there's conjugal love in separation, and that's called Vipralamba. So this conjugal love in separation has three parts. And I'm mentioning this because I'm going to touch on Krishna and Rukmini's relationship, because one of those parts is very prominent at one point in the relationship, and that was right in the beginning. So this conjugal love in separation, this Vipralamba, has three parts. There's preliminary attraction, which is called pure raga. Second, there's mana, seeming anger. And third, there's pravasa, or separation by distance. So, in fact, there had been an instance of this Vipralamba, this conjugal love in separation, right in the beginning of the relationship of, if one can say beginning, but of Krishna and Rukmini, at least when we come to hear of it, and that is that Rukmini had sent a Brahmana with a letter to Krishna outlining how he should actually kidnap her on her wedding day. And Krishna himself, when he has the Brahmana read the letter, he confides in the Brahmana what his feelings are. So here you come to hear something of the conjugal love and devotion on the part of Krishna towards Rukmini, where he himself displays some of this vipralamba, this love in separation from Rukmini. And so they have not met yet, and he tells the Brahmana, this is Krishna's words, just as Rukmini's mind is fixed on me, my mind is fixed on her. I can't even sleep at night. I know that Rukmini, out of envy, I know that Rukmi, out of envy, has forbidden our marriage. So there's Krishna displaying his conjugal love towards Rukmini. He's not even able to rest. His mind is so focused on Rukmini. So at the time of the Brahmana bringing the confidential message from Rukmini, one gets to see the extraordinary dedication that Rukmini has for Lord Krishna. And these are the words given in Bhagavatam that paint this picture of Rukmini's dedication to Lord Krishna. She says, O lotus-eyed one, great souls like I, like Lord Shiva, hanker to bathe in the dust of your lotus feet and thereby destroy their ignorance. If I cannot obtain your mercy, I shall simply give up my vital force, which will have become weak from the severe penances I will perform. Then, after hundreds of lifetimes of endeavor, I may obtain your mercy. So, very extraordinary dedication. She's a young girl, young princess. So, this picture that's presented of conjugal love in devotion is followed by Lord Krishna taking a course of action that's very clear. We've just heard him say that, women who follow the course of action of a person whose path is very uncertain, they're destined to suffer. But here you're getting some idea of the path that Krishna is following. You've already heard about how he's fixed his mind on Rukmini in this conjugal devotional love. And now he takes a course of action that's very clear. So there's nothing about uncertainty. And he states it himself. This is from the 53rd chapter in this canto. So Krishna says, she has dedicated herself exclusively to me, and her beauty is flawless. I will bring her here after thrashing those worthless kings in battle, just as one brings a blazing flame out of firewood. So, very determined, very clear course of action Krishna has, nothing uncertain. And Srila Prabhupada, writing in Krishna book, he attributes these words to Krishna. So he phrases it a little bit differently. This is Sukadeva Goswami writing on Krishna's statement. And Srila Prabhupada rewords it a little differently. So these are Krishna's words as per Srila Prabhupada. Just as one extracts and uses fire after manipulating ordinary wood, after dealing with these demoniac princes, I shall bring forth Rukmini like fire from their midst. So you can hear, very dramatic, very confident, very clear Lord Krishna is of what his course of action is going to be. He's simply going to extract Rukmini from all the surrounding princes who've come there for the wedding. So that clear course of action is performed in that he performs a very specific action. At that moment, when Krishna enters in the scene of the marriage with all these princes who've come with their armies ready to fight him, this is what Krishna does, and this is how it's described. He lifts the princess onto his chariot, whose flag bore the emblem of Garuda. Lord Madhava drove back the circle of kings. With Balaram in the lead, he slowly exited like a lion, removing his prey from the midst of jackals. So very dramatic, very skillfully done, with extreme clarity and precision. So I'm painting this picture because we're challenging Krishna's statement to Rukmini of what he said of himself as not having a clear course. It's not true, at least examining the history of their relationship. Now, Lord Krishna's presentation of himself as one who's not strictly religious or irreligious, and he gives the additional explanation that sometimes he steals other men's wives, obviously not a religious action, and that at other times he follows Vedic conduct or rules. We can look at this a little bit more closely, the statement of Lord Krishna, that he's neither strictly religious or irreligious. So all in reference to the relationship with Rukmini, since he's addressing Rukmini and he's painting this picture of himself to her. So Princess Rukmini had a particular view of Lord Krishna. And here she expresses her view. O Mukunda, you are actually to yourself in lineage, character, beauty, knowledge, youthfulness, wealth, and influence. O lion among men, you delight the minds of all mankind. What aristocratic, sober-minded, and marriageable girl of good family would not choose you as her husband when the proper time has come? So here's Rukmini's view of Lord Krishna. She's actually seen him as unmatched by anyone in terms of lineage, in terms of character, in terms of beauty, in terms of knowledge, in terms of his youthfulness, in terms of his wealth, in terms of his influence. And she says, therefore, my dear Lord, I have chosen you as my husband, and I surrender myself to you. Please come swiftly, O mighty one, and make me your wife. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, let Shishupal never touch the hero's portion like a jackal stealing the property of a lion. So it's quite clear where Rukmini stood and what her understanding of Lord Krishna is. So it was actually by Rukmini's desire that Lord Krishna took Rukmini and beat down Salva and other kings who had come with their entire armies, having planned to band together to fight Krishna should he come to try and steal Rukmini. So it was after all Rukmi who actually had enviousness towards Lord Krishna, who had forbidden the family to give his sister to Lord Krishna, although the family had been willing to do so. So it had in fact been Rukmi who had decided to give Rukmini to Shishupal. So actually it was abuse of his position as an elder brother that Rukmini was to be another man's wife. So the whole thing is interesting because clearly there's clarity on the part of Rukmini in her conjugal relationship with Lord Krishna and her complete and utter dedication to him. And then on the part of Krishna, that he had taken a course of action to accept Rukmini's plan for her kidnapping and then executing it with complete precision. Um, now, so if one looks at the thing that conduct for a king, because, we're examining the statement of Lord Krishna, that men whose behavior is uncertain and who pursue a path not approved by society. So, was Krishna actually following a path not approved by society? Well, the conduct for a king dictates, and this is quoting, he knows the future results of his actions, good and bad, decisively and quickly resolves upon his present course, and understands the consequences of his past deeds, and so will not be conquered. So, this is coming from the Way of Kings, talking about the protocol for kings. And indeed, Lord Krishna is one who did decisively and quickly embark upon a course of action. For he and the commanders of the Yadava army, seeing this whole enemy at the time of taking Rukmini, they raced to attack. Or the enemy was racing to attack, and the whole Yadu army turned to face the attackers, and they stood firm. So this is looking at acting decisively and quickly resolving upon his course of action. Krishna certainly did that. The whole Yadava army stood and turned and faced and stood firm with all these various kings that had taken the side of Shishupal and were ready to oppose Lord Krishna. So this, of course, was the moment when all these infuriated kings, headed by Jarasandha, they donned their armor, they mounted their conveyances, they had bows in their hand, and they were filled with this feeling that they could not tolerate the humiliating defeat at the hands of Lord Krishna, who had driven back that circle of kings and had exited, I'd mentioned that, like a lion removing his prey from the midst of jackals. So the consequences of this action taken by Lord Krishna was the following. So here we hear the consequences, because the army went right at these opposing kings, the Yadu army. So this was the consequence. Heads of soldiers fighting on chariots, horses, and elephants fell to the ground by the millions. Some heads wore earrings, others turbans. So that was the consequence of Krishna's action and standing firm. So finally, again, it questions the statement that Krishna makes, that he's following a path not approved by society. If one were to look, that his original action was in the Rakshasa style, that he's kidnapping a princess on the day of a wedding, stealing her away, it's actually permissible behavior for a Kshatriya if the Kshatriya is able to oppose or stand up to the opposition. And indeed, we see here that Krishna has done that with no uncertainty. And finally, Lord Krishna is speaking that he does not follow common social behavior, because that's one of the things he says of himself, since he insulted Rukmi in front of Rukmini. And again, this is not totally accurate, because Lord Krishna had smashed to bits every weapon of Rukmi's. And the description is given. There was an iron bludgeon, 3-pointed spear, a sword, a shield, a pike, a javelin, and finally Rukmi's sword and shield. And then he was preparing to kill Rukmi. And that's when Rukmini had interceded and begged for the life of her brother. And the description is that she grasped Krishna's lotus feet, and the Lord, feeling compassionate, desisted from killing her brother Rukmi. And this is how she put it. O controller of all mystic power, immeasurable one, Lord of lords, master of the universe, O all auspicious and mighty, armed one, please do not kill my brother. So this idea that Krishna is presenting of himself, that he doesn't follow common social behavior, was because he performed this action in front of Rukmini. And this is the action he performed. The description is there. Lord Krishna tied up the wrongdoer with a strip of cloth. He then proceeded to disfigure Rukmi by comically shaving him, leaving parts of his moustache and hair. So that was the action Krishna performed in front of Rukmini, so actually humiliating her brother. So he's referring here to himself as a person who doesn't follow common social behavior. And one will add that this was done with the same sharp sword that he had intended to use to kill Rukmi. So, one could question, is this actually then proof for Lord Krishna saying to Rukmi, or presenting this picture of himself now in order to arouse her anger, that actually he doesn't follow common social behavior? Well, the truth of the matter is that there was no other position where Rukmini could be, because she landed up being in the middle of the skirmish between the Yadava army and the opposing king's armies. And the fact that later on, and Krishna gave her assurance that they would be defeated with no problem. She had a moment of fear. And then later on, that she had to actually witness her brother coming in pursuit of Lord Krishna and herself, and being ready to actually kill Krishna, who by rights had that right as a Kshatriya to steal the bride. And he did it, and he did it in a victorious manner. So the fact that Rukmi was treating Krishna as a thief is not actually accurate by social convention, at least Kshatriya social convention. The fact that there was this disfigurement of Rukmi on the part of Krishna in front of Rukmini, one could say, oh, was that not correct? Well, it was the nature of the circumstance. Krishna actually showed extreme compassion because he spared the life of Rukmi. Rukmi, from the beginning, was extremely antagonistic towards Lord Krishna. He'd abused his social position as elder brother, even opposing the family to give Rukmini to Krishna. And then the fact that even after Krishna had been victorious in stealing Rukmini in front of the other kings, that he himself was willing to kill Krishna. And that in a battle between the two of them, Krishna actually proved superior by destroying every single weapon, permitted him to perform some act of punishment towards Rukmi. And the fact that his life was spared through Rukmini's intervention still shows great compassion and consideration on the part of Krishna. And one could say it was within the realm of social behavior. I mean, very much so. Now, the fact that Lord Krishna was bound up in this mood of conjugal love and his responsibilities as a king and suitor in his obtaining Rukmini as his bride, and even though he performs an action that now presents as socially unacceptable, that is to have disfigured Rukmi, it can be said that it was a mild punishment meted out for inappropriate behavior on the part of Rukmi. So Lord Krishna had gained Rukmini, stealing her on her wedding day, but it was done honorably since indeed he did defeat those kings. Now, that Lord Krishna should wish to use these words that he's using today to provoke Rukmini's anger, it doesn't seem possible by virtue of her mood, because we've heard of her uh, extreme dedication to Lord Krishna, and also taking into account the inaccuracy of the words of Lord Krishna. They're definitely inaccurate. And taking into account the fact that Rukmini has this prema that's endowed with knowledge of the Lord's powers, which has arisen from the Lord's mercy upon her. So it seems unlikely that she's now going to retort in anger. It seems unlikely. And we're going to come to hear how she does actually respond. So there's a sort of description of this particular mood of prema that Rukmini has towards Lord Krishna, because there is this understanding of the Lord's powers. And this is how it's put: affection for the Lord more than anyone else, which is very firm and includes knowledge of the Lord's powers, is called bhakti. By that bhakti, a person attains powers in the spiritual world as well as other rewards. There is no other way of attaining such things. So that's given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, just by way of how it's described. Somebody in this, having this kind of prema that Rukmini has. So she has her own spiritual powers that are quite extraordinary, and one's going to come to hear how she responds with her particular spiritual powers. So basically, Rukmini has this awareness that Krishna is God. And the emotions present in conjugal love, in direct relationship, generally can include anger. It can include dread, astonishment, chivalry, laughter. So these are the emotions that generally comprise this prema of somebody in conjugal love and having a direct relationship. So it is possible for her to have anger. It's possible for her to experience dread. And Krishna's wanting to see the anger part because he has not seen that yet. But every one of these emotions, whether it's anger, dread, astonishment, chivalry, laughter, all of them are considered great reservoirs of pleasure. And because they show this taste of conjugal love. And it allows that love to expand. And so that's what Krishna's looking for that love to expand. And through having some desire become manifest in Rukmini. So we're going to come and see that how she responds. And it has to be within the realm of these 6 particular emotions, because that, according to the definition from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, make up this kind of conjugal relationship where there is awareness of Krishna as God. So we're going to see if Krishna was successful or not. So far in describing and examining Krishna's words, without having gone into what I know is coming up, it would definitely seem that Rukmini may not be one to respond with anger. So it seems more likely it would be dread, and we're going to come and see indeed how she does respond. So these are some thoughts on the verses today, and I particularly focused on 13 because I think it's significant in terms of what the Acharyas, and particularly Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, is seen as the purpose of Krishna's saying these words, and I've tried to examine the words to see what possibility there is of those words arousing the necessary transcendental emotion from Rukmini. there's any thoughts, comments, questions.
Um, I was just thinking how difficult it is to understand, to properly understand these transcendental relationships. Um, in this case, uh, as you mentioned, that all these different rasas, they are the source of great transcendental pleasure for the Lord and for the devotees. Now, when Krishna says that, oh, Rukmini doesn't show anger, and I would like to enjoy the, the taste of her anger like that. And when you look at it from the perspective of the material experience, it's like, what? It's like the last thing an spouse wants to experience is the anger of, the spouse, the other partner. So it's always, like the last thing you want to. And but Krishna wants to enjoy it. So, and in the material perspective, either you're crazy or you are, some sort of a masochistic, abuser type of person, that gets pleasure on torturing, someone else, that type of thing. So it's impossible to understand. That's why for materialistic persons, to understand Krishna's pastimes, it becomes very difficult. That's the whole thing of understanding the human-like pastimes of Krishna is impossible for the mutas or the materialistic people. Uh, Persons saying that Krishna is immoral because he dances with young girls, married girls, type of things in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada chastising the fellow, you are the immoral one. That exchange. But, so it's this, how difficult it is, just thinking on that. So as a comment.
Yeah, it's, I guess the distinction rests, between a material relationship and a spiritual relationship between husband and wife. It rests on in the one case, the very strong presence of the ego, and in the other case, the complete absence of the ego. So, or at least there's complete identification of oneself as a servitor of Lord Krishna. So it's having given oneself to the Supreme Lord. So hence, the expression of emotions are not coming from an egotistical, selfish space. So indeed, your picture of the avoidance of the anger in a common material relationship is much desired because it's fueled by an egotistical space, so it's unpleasant. But yeah, on the spiritual, in the spiritual conjugal relationship, the fact that there's the absence of the ego, the absence of the selfishness allows for that purity of even supposed anger to be something that's loving. It's quite extraordinary. Yes, quite extraordinary.
The fact that, in the material world, we all jivas at the end, and the jivas are prakriti of the Lord. So the Lord is Purusha, and all the jivas, regardless, they're prakriti. So the relationship is the natural conjugal relationship, or the natural relationship of dependence is there. So the jivas has, as energy, is more of a, female type of. It's not that, there's no um, males in the spiritual world as we know, but the relationship towards Krishna is the purusha, or the enjoyer. And here in the material world, even though there's a relationship of conjugal relationship, it is not, from the perspective of that higher realm, it's not natural that someone function as the purusha and the other functions as the, you know. So when the relationship with Krishna is established, both are um, connected to Krishna as the servitors, and Krishna is the enjoyer. So it's not, if we establish, trying to imitate Krishna's position as I am the controller, and this is my, you know, this is supposed to be my servant, or my, that type of thing, it just doesn't work.
Thank you for highlighting that. Yes, that touches very much on the second verse that I didn't go into too much. The verse where Krishna is actually painting the picture of himself, where he actually says, just to reiterate your point, we have no material possessions, and we are dear to those who similarly have nothing. Therefore, O slender one, the wealthy hardly ever worship me. So just that idea that actually the complete dependence on, that he's the controller. And he's presenting this picture of himself. Well, I have no material possessions. And he can comfortably say that because it is actually a lower position, as you pointed out, because in the material world, generally, status is everything. And there's often resentment of status. But on the spiritual plane, it's actually a desired position to actually view Krishna as how Rukmini expresses it throughout, as this immeasurable powers that he has, and acknowledging them and being uh, given to serving. Yeah. So thank you. That's a nice point that you brought up. Vaishnav Sivananda.
Thank you for class. Um, in relationship to the class, what is the purpose of a devotee putting on saffron? Like to after going through the Grihastha ashram, it's generally recommended that at 50, right? I don't know if it is or not, but what is the purpose of to go to the next level of Vanapras and put the saffron? What is the? Do you have any knowledge of that?
So it's moving beyond the duties of raising a family and maintaining a home and performing one's religious duties as well, but moving into a position, the vanaprastha, of having stepped away from the responsibility of raising a family, maintaining a home, but rather taking time to go to places of pilgrimage. So shifting one's focus to a high percentage of time being spent in direct devotional activities. Of course, as Vaishnava, one is performing all one's household duties also in service to Lord Krishna. It's just that the activities now are don't have the same focus and need because the family has grown up. So the household doesn't serve the same function. It's not serving as a shelter for the upbringing of children. So yeah, so and also by age, one is also moving closer to exiting this world. So the focus is on going to places of pilgrimage. So,
Are there any books that we can read to prepare ourselves for that?
oh, hmm. Well, I suppose books that deal with hmm, hmm. I have to look in my library and I'll get back to you as to what specific thing, maybe some specific writing that would illustrate something of the mentality with which one is approaching the shift to Vanaprastha. I mean, my spiritual master said it's almost like a non-existent ashram in ISKCON, but we have had visiting devotees who are actually practicing as Vanaprastha devotees, and um, I'm recalling a devotee, I believe, Germany, passing through last year. Um, but I'll get back to you with which particular books may be nice to look at. Oh, Subal?
In the ninth canto, that describe Vanaprastha from the perspective of the Vedic tradition. It describes all the ashrams, but including Vanaprastha. It's pretty extreme, but it's from the perspective of the Vedas in the Vedic time, and the principle remains the same. So, as you say, Narada Muni explained to Yudhishthira Maharaj that the householder, both husband and wife, they go to the forest and places of pilgrimage, and have no home, take up renunciation, and put up bark, clothing, doesn't maintain the body, eats only, it's this extreme renunciation, and perform devotional service like that, cultivate, the internal um, meditation, devotion like that. So quite tough there.
Yes, actually, you can buy bark clothing. Just by the way, I did come across it somewhere. So you can actually get your wardrobe in advance. But yeah, the added point of Sabal is appreciated that you're minimizing your physical needs. Yeah. So, the acquisition of things for bodily comfort goes down dramatically. That's the added point. Thank you, Sabal. I think there's a question there.
Um, Thank you for the nice class. But what Vaishnav Sevananda said about the saffron clothing, isn't it more like a mental frame of mind instead of a physical putting on saffron robes? Because uh, there are many people who are like very spiritually minded, and they will not put on robes, but they have given up the attachment to this material world, and their mindset is such that they are just living for other people rather than put on saffron robes and think about one's own spiritual development, but not about the humanity at large. So it's like more of a mental frame of mind is like what
Okay.
I think.
So you were giving your analysis of persons, or what the significance is of having the donning saffron, and pointing to the fact that persons may not have donned saffron, but they may have been the right mental state, a more kind of renounced state that's sort of altruistic or thinking of society's welfare. Um, well, there are many altruists and philanthropists in the world, and generally in society that's viewed as commendable and commendable. So hence one may do very charitable works like opening hospitals, planting trees, digging wells, uh, and such persons could be said to have a very charitable disposition. That, of course, is quite different to actually having gone through the four orders of spiritual life, where there is progressive spiritual advancement, because the focus of all one's activities through the different stages, and the different stages are also going through the four societal changes that persons go through. So, from being a student, progressing to being a householder, progressing to being the couple, getting more renounced, finally being fully renounced. So, the persons who go through the proper system with the correct focus from the beginning as students, to that very last point, there's actually a purification of heart that goes on, that has to do with cultivating a love for Krishna. So that's quite different, because a person at the end of their life who has come to a point of donning saffron, or perhaps not donning saffron, but has gone through the four spiritual divisions progressively, and has progressively purified his or her heart, is in actually a way superior position to somebody who's merely performing charitable philanthropic work, and has not gone through the recommended process of cultivating a higher consciousness.
But in Gita, that's what Krishna says, that a real renunciate is one who fights his battles of daily life and still doesn't give up his duties. That's a true renunciate. That's what Krishna says in Gita.
Yes, one has to, in whichever a spiritual division one falls in, or whichever social division is accompanying that, one has duties to perform. That is accurate. And but the performance of those duties has to be with the correct consciousness. So the consciousness has to be that the duties are being performed for the pleasure of Krishna. Otherwise, there's not spiritual advancement. So that's the key element, that if that's missing, then it's on a material level. And even being dutiful or being charitable is not the same as somebody who's actually fixed their consciousness in the right way and is following Krishna's system of progressively elevating the consciousness and coming to a more purified state of being firmly fixed on what the goal of life is, which is that connection with Krishna and cultivating love for Krishna. Thank you. Talk in the microphone so that it can be heard. Okay.
Time to close the class, but
Go ahead.
Srila Bhakti Sundar Maharaj sent this text. Today is Sri Rukmini Dwadasi.
Oh.
Sri Rukmini Dwadasi is observed as the birthday, the day Rukmini Devi appeared on earth, of Rukmini, the consort of Lord Krishna. The love story of Rukmini and Lord Krishna and their elopement, elopement is one of the most famous stories associated with Krishna. Rukmini Dwadasi is observed on the 12th day of the Sukla Paksha. Well, anyway, it goes on like that. But it happens to be Shrimati Rukmini Devi's birthday.
Wonderful.
So here's qualities of Rukmini Devi. Ruchira Nanam, whose face is charming. She's shy, exalted of saintly character, possessing of intelligence, possessing of auspicious bodily markings, magnanimous, of proper behavior, an ideal wife, the divine goddess, dark-eyed, enchanting, aristocratic, sober-minded, of good family, expert, knower of bodily symptoms, having rendered devotional service, dedicated exclusively to Krishna, of flawless beauty, sweetly smiling, lovely hips, glowing bimba red lips, firm breast, walking with the motions of a royal swan, shapely waist, whose mind is stolen by Krishna, and a repository of all other good qualities.
Thank you very, very much for reading the beautiful qualities of Rukmini Devi, and we're so grateful that we now know that our discussion took place on the day that's her appearance day. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, and ki jai. Thank you.